Hello there. My name is Piladi Pasha. You're listening to Girl of the House, which is a newsletter and podcast journal where I reflect on my life as a daughter learning to lead her family's business. This podcast is the audio edition of my Substack newsletter. Here, I narrate my journal for those who would rather listen than read. Today's journal entry is titled 10 Lessons for Business I Learned in the Last Decade. Enjoy! In this newsletter, I would like to reflect on the lessons I learned during the last 10 years of my life, 2016 to 2025, that I think will be helpful to my new role as a businesswoman, which I've decided to fully embrace with the beginning of 2026. A lot has happened over the last decade. I'm not going to go into great detail about the last 10 years of my life. That is an autobiography for another day. To cut a long story short, I essentially went from being a university dropout to a Master of Arts graduate failing to get employed, to now being entrusted with a family business that I do not feel qualified to operate. I feel unqualified to operate it because I never grew up with the expectation that after university I would return home to work with my father rather than breaking out on my own. Before my late 20s, there was no business in my family. During my childhood and early adulthood, I was encouraged to study to become employable and have my own financial independence, not to co-own and run a family business. Besides my lack of grooming for family business ownership, another fact that makes me feel ill-equipped is my lack of work experience. The only employment I ever had before this was my gig as a university tutor, which I held for 2.5 years while studying towards my master's qualification. So I do not have any corporate experience that qualifies me for my new executive role. This is why I'm examining the last decade to see how the experiences and observations of those years have prepared me for the next chapter of my life. This is not an experts list. I'm simply trying to identify how my past has equipped me for my future. Although I have a past that is over 33 years long, I chose to specifically review the period between 2016 to 2025 because these are the years that followed the most pivotal events of my life. They are the years when I dusted the pain of 2013 to 2015 off myself and began to rebuild my life from the ruins of those 3 hopeless years. So the last decade is very significant to me. With that said, I've previously reflected on the pain of my life not going as planned in a post titled Unbecoming Borrowed Biographies. I invite you to go check that out to get more context. Because I consider myself as the pivot generation, whose choices will determine the fortunes of her descendants, I think it's also important to take stock of those years for future heirs of the family business who will eventually inherit the legacy that is being entrusted to me. There's a quote by Brene Brown which reads, "One day, you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide." That is how I think of the entirety of the Substack project. Ultimately, each month, I am gradually developing a survival guide for the successes that will follow after me. On my Substack's About page, I've written a paragraph which confesses that this publication is first an open love letter to future heirs of the family business to help them in their stewardship of our shared heritage for the descendants that will follow after them. I'd like to believe that the following list is a step towards realizing that declaration. Let's get into it. Number 1. Health is the only wealth there is. We've reached the end of today's journal entry. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Cue in outro music. Nah, I'm joking. But honestly, need I say more? That's my drops mic moment. However, because I promised you a list of 10, I shall continue. In a nutshell, my life began to crumble when the stress of university caused me to make poor health choices regarding sleep, diet, and exercise. On the flip side of that, it started to turn around when I chose my mental health over my studies and got over the FOMO of keeping up with my peers' success. I often say that there is no fame, money, or position that is more important than my well being. If an opportunity that is presented to me threatens my well being, I'd rather pass on it. It's not worth the cost of my health. That's an extremely high price to pay for any success because health equals life. So, if I'm sacrificing my health for an opportunity, I'm essentially sacrificing my life. Number 2, self care is like hygiene, it's an everyday thing. Typically, when we talk about self care, we tend to talk about it as an occasional and luxurious thing, a once in a while emergency rescue activity we do when we're at the edge of burnout. Well, at least that is the idea I interpreted from how those around me and the media talked about it. You know that saying, today is my self care day? Yeah, that signaled to me that people approach it as an occasional luxury, and I followed that trend. However, that all changed for me during the global pandemic and lockdown that followed in 2020. I can't pinpoint exactly what influenced that change, but somewhere during that period, I went from making self care a Sunday thing in 2019 to making it an everyday habit by the end of 2020. Now, I have a daily self care ritual I call my centering practice. Every morning, I start the day with prayer and either jogging or yoga. Then I end my exercise with reading the Bible and more prayer. This helps me to embody my physical form and feel connected to my senses. It also helps quiet the noise and tension in my brain that I tend to wake up with and to feel less anxious about the day ahead. So it helps me to feel centered, not only within myself, but also my faith in God. Hence why I call it my centering practice. Before making self care a daily habit, I used to wake up feeling fatigued, with a lot of aches and stiffness in my body. My younger self definitely did not feel as energized and flexible as I do in my 30s. I also experienced a lot of headaches, and I was relying on painkillers to survive the day. Yep, I was a mild drug addict. Now, I can go days without reaching for a bottle of medicine, and when I do, I often digest half a pill, whereas when I was relying on painkillers, I would ingest two at a time. This is no longer my life because I made my health not only a daily priority, but also the first priority of the day. So, to survive the stress of operating a business, it is important to keep self care as part of my everyday hygiene and not schedule it for special days or occasion. It is the center from which I plan to operate my family's business. Number 3, your preparedness for the next day begins the night before. My attitude about when the day starts has changed. I used to think that my day starts the morning off, but I've realized that it actually starts the night before. So, two ways in which I prepare for the following day include sleep. I've observed that I'm in a better mood and I'm more efficient during the day when I've gotten a good night's rest. If I don't get enough rest, I tend to feel like my day is ruined and wasted. So, rest is vital, not only for my ability to function, but also for my mood. My health has become so precious to me, and sleep is so integral to it. I do not plan to compromise sleep in order to become a successful businesswoman, or else I'm going to be miserable. It is understandable to forsake sleep for emergencies that happen during the middle of the night, but it shouldn't be a habit. Before I go to sleep, another way in which I prepare for the next day is by writing a list of tasks that need to be prioritized. This helps me to hit the ground running as soon as I wake up because I know what needs to get done. When I procrastinate the planning and writing of the list to the morning of, sometimes it makes me aimless and easily distracted during the day. Because when I wake up, I will run with the first distraction that grabs my attention and might never get to what is important for the day. Number 4, care for the people you work with. I suspect that there is a rise in depression and anxiety because people are working with colleagues whom they feel do not care about them. Working in such environments can make one feel not safe to take risks and fail without the fear of losing their job security or reputation. I started to thrive in my studies when I returned to school and changed to a major that placed me in a faculty department where I felt cared for by my lecturers as well as my classmates. Trust me, I am not exaggerating when I say the department cared. To show you how much they cared, one of our lecturers invited 2 counselors from the university's wellness center to our class because she felt that we, the students, were burnt out and would benefit from a group session led by the wellness counselors. I'll never forget it. It was a very cathartic class. This was memorable because I've never experienced anything like it before that class and since I graduated from that university. Anyways, considering that I'm the incoming business owner, this point is less about my own emotional security in a work environment. Rather, it is a note to self to be a business owner that cultivates a similar work environment for employed staff. I hope to create a business environment where employees feel cared for and safe to be creative in how they do their jobs. Because when employees thrive, the business will also thrive. Number 5, wise counsel, mentorship, or networks are not only found in people. When I was a student, before I dropped out and changed faculty departments, I approached a lecturer that I admired and asked her to be my mentor. She refused. If you ever grow the courage to humble yourself before people to ask for their help but get rejected, do not lose your determination. Because we live in an age where information is democratized. There are no more gatekeepers of knowledge or expertise. Instead, there's a plethora of books and podcasts available which give you access to anyone and their networks that you can use to help yourself in whatever journey you're on. Plus, now with the rollout of artificial intelligence, one has a personalized and even more advanced mentor that can give them any resource they need. On the other hand, if you can't afford a library of books or Wi-Fi to listen to podcasts or chat to an AI bot, you can invest the little money you have into buying a Bible. It has all the advice you need on any topic, including business and finance. So one does not need to have access to an individual or network of people to get professional and business advice. Just pick a medium and platform, then engage. All of the above mentioned tools are what I'm using to help myself on this business evolution I'm on. Number 6, it's okay to change your mind and pivot. We live in a culture in which we are asked to choose our career-based identities as children. Remember the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Then, we are expected to have 5 to 10-year plans when we're grown. Society expects us to make decisions for our lives and futures that are always certain. However, what I've observed from my exposure to my family's business is that executive decisions often change. Operating a business contradicts how we've been raised to approach life and our futures because it is not always a certain thing. It makes a fool of society's strict ideology of following a 5 or 10-year plan. Rather, business strategies can be fragile and inconsistent, especially when one is leading an enterprise that is at a small scale like ours. So, I'm learning to embrace the attitude of pivoting in my business decision making when it is necessary to do so, instead of being precious or stubborn about decisions. Number 7, be unapologetic about your truth. In a digital age where society is migrating online and everyone is chasing virality, it can be easy for one to get lost in following trends to become relevant and go viral, especially considering that attention is the currency of the digital economy. It's the new gold rush that promises fortunes for anyone that can mine the eyeballs of others, and everyone is competing to capture and profit from the attention of others. However, it appears that many content producers are doing so at the cost of their integrity. Creators seem to say and do anything that will get them the eyeballs of others, even if what they're putting out is not authentic to them. Yet, there's nothing that is sustainable long term without integrity. I can attest to this because since late 2023, I've been stuck at a crossroad where I've been questioning whether I should stay on TikTok or leave the platform. I've been stuck with this question because TikTok doesn't feel authentic to me. But the numbers that are following my profile are my stumbling block because they are the largest I have compared to those on the platforms that feel more authentic but are not as popular. So I'm finding it hard to leave TikTok because I'm afraid I won't see those numbers again. Although I'm proud of every piece of content I've published on the platform, still, my soul is tormented by my presence on it, simply because the short video format does not feel genuine to me. Now, my activity on TikTok is paralyzed because of this torture. What this is emphasizing to me is to always be guided by authenticity in every business decision, even in the details that seem insignificant, such as the communication medium of a social media platform. I should make decisions that I can be unapologetic about, even if they are unpopular, because I am pursuing brand longevity, not virality. Number 8. Never a failure, always a lesson. At university, I did a course called Reflective Practice, in which, as part of our assessment, we had to journal about what we learned in class, as well as the outreach programs we led in schools and communities. I hated that part of the course because one had to be critical of not only their work, but also of themselves and society, and how their personal beliefs or society's politics have influenced their work. I despised it so much. I would go almost an entire semester without writing any entries in my journal. Then, when it was close to the deadline, when we had to submit our journals, I would spend some sleepless nights trying to catch up. I know, I was a terrible student. How I managed to pass that course with distinction still amazes me. Regardless of my displeasure with some aspects of the course, it seems to have had a lasting impact on me because I still practice the critical thinking it taught. The lessons of that course have cemented themselves in my life as this Girl of the House newsletter, which is now my adaptation of a critical reflective journal. What I learned from that course is to be a student of my practice because no experience is wasted. There's always a lesson to learn from both the wins and losses. That is the aim of the Substack newsletter, which is to be a student of my business practice and learn from especially the failures. Number 9, financial literacy is a must. One of my core senior subjects in high school was accounting, but I abandoned it after matric. Yet now, I'm realizing how crucial it is for business. I'm even relying on my old high school accounting textbooks to help me keep the financial records of our business. This has made me appreciate the importance of financial literacy for a business owner, so much so that I plan to enroll to a bookkeeping short course to resuscitate my accounting knowledge. My surprising advice to anyone who aspires towards being an entrepreneur would be to follow an accounting or bookkeeping track in their studies, instead of the typical business administration stream, because they will need to understand the language of numbers and the systems of financial statements to be able to tell if their businesses are truly profitable or not. It's surprising to me that I am giving this advice because when I decided to abandon accounting after high school, I never imagined that I would one day encourage anyone else to pursue the subject. Number 10, The most admired and celebrated individuals or organizations are those that serve humanity. It's typical at the beginning of each new year, or when we're transitioning from one role into another or pursuing a new project, to ask ourselves what our true purpose in life is. And if you're a Christian, the question might be phrased as, what is God's will for my life? At the start of 2026, where I am transitioning into my new role as a businesswoman, I find myself sitting with the same question. However, not only am I asking what God's will for my life is, I'm also asking what His will for my family's business is. More specifically, I'm wondering, what legacy does He have for it? I'm sitting with this inquiry because I have a couple of projects that I'm running concurrently, in addition to the business. And although they are all desires of my heart, it has come to a point where I'm feeling overwhelmed by them. So I've been looking to God to give me discernment about which project I should prioritize and which I should let fall away. Which project is His true purpose for my life? Every time I meditate on this question, I find myself being led to the same answer, which is to love God and others. I landed on the same response in 2019 when I was plotting the next steps for my life post-university. Again, I arrived at it in 2024 during my first attempts to relocate for the business. Now, the same answer has been emphasized when I sought clarity about which project to prioritize. Love is the project that God wants me to prioritize. Love is the greatest instruction He gave to our lives. It is the purpose of all of our lives. This revelation makes sense considering the industry our business is in, which is hospitality, because hospitality is characterized by the principle of the second greatest commandment, that is to love your neighbor as yourself. Although it is transactional, ultimately, business is about being of service to others, whether that is providing a need that individuals have or bridging gaps in communities. We are all pivot generations and stewards, not only in familial contexts, but also in commercial and public spheres. Therefore, in everything that we do, we need to act collectively and in the common good of others. I've observed that the businesses that go on to have legacies are those that have served and united humanity. So, I hope to pursue a business plan that aspires towards a legacy of neighborliness, the friendly welcoming of strangers, building community, offering help, and being generous. Basically, I aspire towards doing every business activity for the glory of love, because love is the fulfillment of God's will. There you go. 10 lessons for business I learned in the last decade of my life. I must admit, this was a challenging yet very rewarding list to reflect on. So, I'm glad we've reached the end of today's journal entry. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for free to receive new posts of Girl of the House directly in your email inbox. If you stayed with me till the end, thank you for listening. I appreciate your time and attention. Talk to you in the next episode. Goodbye.